Hello, my name is Joe Cutting. My co-authors are Robert Klassen, Michael Saiger, Sophie Thompson-Lee and Rebecca Snell, and our talk is called Exploring Player Experience Factors for Designing Persuasive Recruitment Games. So there's a shortage of recruits to many socially useful careers such as healthcare, construction and teaching. Here's a story from the United Nations where they're issuing a global alert over teacher shortages. Now that picture I think is from Ghana, but this also applies to many Western nations such as the UK, the US and Australia. Now, persuasive recruitment games are games specifically designed to change attitudes and behaviour, and these have the potential to increase the number of people applying to these careers and reduce these shortages. So how do we design recruitment games? Well, luckily there's lots of literature on designing persuasive games more generally. So this is the transformational framework, which I think comes from Carnegie Mellon, and there's lots of advice there on creating this kind of general persuasive games. And similarly, there's quite a few people who've looked at the way that game experience influences persuasion. Now, game experience is the experience that you have when you're playing a game, and this has been divided into different factors. So, for example, the player experience inventory questionnaire, that measures 10 factors of game experience. So factors like mastery, immersion, and autonomy. And some of these factors have been seen as being important in the effectiveness of persuasive games. And I'm going to talk about just a few of them now. So competence and autonomy are experiences that you might have when you're playing a game. And these are also considered by basic psychological needs theory, which is a sub-theory of self-determination theory, which if you're playing Kai Play Bingo is on the card, so you can mark that now. And basically this posits that players are motivated to satisfy needs for competence, autonomy and relatedness. And it's been hypothesized that persuasive games which satisfy these needs will be more effective. More experience factors of interest are relevance and meaning, and authors like Yacovides et al. Have said that for a game to be persuasive, it needs to feel relevant to our lives, and they created a game to persuade students to manage their work-life balance and tried to make that feel relevant. And it should not just be a related topic, it needed to feel personally meaningful to their lives. And then the final experience factor is immersion. Now, immersion is that feeling of being inside the game and not knowing what's going on around you. And immersion has been used in studies which say compared third person and first person perspectives in 3D games and found that first person perspective is more immersive. Now, authors such as Hafner and Jans have said that immersion heightens participants' susceptibility to persuasion, so is an important factor in the effectiveness of persuasive games. So you can see that there's kind of several experience factors which have been linked to persuasion, but the evidence is all a bit hypothetical and nobody actually compares to find out which ones are the most important. So our main overall research question was, which experience factors are the most important for recruitment games? And to answer that, we used data from an existing study on teacher recruitment interventions with 989 participants, so lots of people, and 3 conditions, which aren't necessarily the conditions that we would have chosen, but they were the ones that we had and had to work with. So those 3 conditions were a game specifically designed to increase teacher recruitment, which is called TeachQuest, and as you can see, it's an interactive narrative game. So you're a teacher and you're placed in a story with pupils and there's things happening and you have to make a choice as to which option you're going to choose, and that takes you to the next place in the story. The second option were called realistic job previews. And in realistic job previews were initially designed for assessing how good people would be at being teachers, but they were also found to actually influence people's perceptions of applying for teaching. So what happens there is that you view classroom scenarios. So in this one, Mark's using his phone when he should be paying attention, and then you rate the possible responses on how appropriate this is. And then you receive a fit message on your fit with the job and how good you would be at being a teacher. And then the final condition was a control condition where participants played this Gravity Highs platform game, which hopefully they saw as nothing similar to being a teacher at all. And then for measures of effectiveness, both before and after the intervention, the study measured participants' interest in teaching, self-efficacy at teaching, so that's their confidence, and their person-vocation fit, which is how well they saw them fit with that vocation for teaching, using standard scales. The study also measured PXI game experience factors of mastery and competence, autonomy, meaning, and immersion. So what were the results? Well, game experience varied between conditions, as you might expect. So if we look at meaning, meaning was highest for both the Teach Quest and realistic job preview conditions. But then if you look at mastery, mastery was highest in the realistic job preview. If you look at autonomy, autonomy was highest in the Teach Quest game condition. And then finally, if you look at immersion, immersion was highest in both the Teach Quest and control game conditions and lower in the realistic job preview. So what impact does each factor have on persuasion though? Well, to find this out, we did a multiple linear regression, and that shows the effect of each factor across all three conditions. And we also included the condition as a control variable to remove the effect of any condition-specific confound. So for example, the quality of graphics varied hugely between conditions, and that's a condition-specific confound. So by including condition, we just get the effect of each experience factor. So how did that go? Well, which experiences predicted the change in interest in teaching? So if you look at this chart, you can see what comes out of the regression is that meaning has the strongest effect on changes of interest, with mastery a smaller effect, but no effect of immersion or autonomy. How about self-efficacy for teaching? Well, if you look at the regression results, then that shows that mastery had the strongest effect on self-efficacy, and meaning having smaller effect, but once again no effect of autonomy or immersion. And then finally, if you look at person-vocation fit, you can see that the change in person-vocation fit is mainly predicted by mastery experiences, but also some meaning experiences, with once again no effect of autonomy or immersion. So this kind of shows that meaning and mastery experiences had the most impact on persuasion effectiveness, and autonomy immersion had little effect. And because interest, self-efficacy, and PV fit have been applied to many careers and whether people make those choices, these results may generalize to other recruitment games. So our kind of big takeaway is, if you're designing recruitment games, to maximize experiences of meaning and mastery, and don't worry too much about immersion or autonomy. Thank you. You can also play Teach Quest online at that address.